Today we will talk about creationism and evolutionism, which is often an obstacle to the beliefs of people who study science. Many people now believe that evolution is a proven truth, but it is not. Evolution is true, but Darwin's theory of evolution is indeed wrong. Now let's look at the first slide, creationism versus evolutionism. I'm going to use 3 W's to discuss this topic, starting with what? What is biological evolution? Biological evolution refers to the gradual change of organism, the process of transitioning from one state to another. Next, creationism versus evolutionism. The word evolution comes from the Latin word evolution, which specifically refers to the evolution of organisms from lower, simpler states to higher, more complex states. I believe that everyone is already familiar with the meaning of evolution. Okay, next slide, creationism versus evolutionism. Let's look at second W, which evolution is a fact. And I believe that both creationism and evolutionism are facts about the evolution of living things from the lower to the higher. But the third W, why evolution, creationism, and evolutionism have completely different explanations. And next, 4. Darwin's theory of evolution, genetic mutation, natural selection, and the survival of the fittest, which will naturally evolve step by step into higher creatures without the intervention of God. The creation theory of the Bible. The first seer is divided into 2 stages. The first seer is created by God's creation, and then through God's intelligent design, transformation, and guidance, it slowly evolves into higher creatures. Next. 5. Creationism of the Bible. The Bible, there are 2 creation for in Hebrew. One is bara, one is asa. Bara is out of nothing, the created. English translation is created. Asa is another word, is design and transformation. And the English translation is made. The creationism of the Bible clearly tells us that there are 2 ways of God's creation. The first is to create something out of nothing. The Hebrew word is bara. English is translated as created. The other is from what is existing to transform into something else. Hebrew is asa, and English is translated as made. God created all things, and unlike some Christians who say that all living things were created by God out of nothing, they oppose and reject evolution and believe that there is no such things as evolution. But the Bible clearly tells that God used the 2 ways to create all things. There are only 3 places where bara was used in Genesis, and many other places use the word asa, which is the meaning of evolution, and God used the bara to make something out of nothing to start first. But then most of the changes are designed, transformed, and guided to make the primitive life created step by step and gradually transformed into higher animals. Okay. Next slide, 6, creationism of the Bible. Let's look at the first chapter for the Bible's Genesis, which described God's creation of heaven and earth, creature and human. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:7. God made the expanse. And Genesis 1:16. And God made the two great lights, the great light to rule the day and lesser light to rule the night and the stars. Well, next, the first chapter of Genesis records the story of God's creation of all things in the universe, divided into three stages. And one is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:7, God made the expanse, Asa. And Genesis 1:16, God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. Asa here is used. The first chapter of Genesis records the story of out of nothing. First, God created the heavens and the earth using bara to create something out of nothing, and then using the several asa to design and transform, and created light, water, dry land, sun, moon, and stars, which is the first stage. Next slide, 8. The creationism of the Bible. Here in the second stage, the various living creatures in the sea were created with bara, in which God first used bara to create the first single-cell organism in the sea, and then used the asa to evolve into various sea creatures. But the Bible uses the word bara here to create bara and evolve asa, and both processes are presented by the word bara. That is, bara, which is a single-cell organism in the sea, is made out of nothing, plus the later modified and evolved asa to describe the story of the creation of the sea organism. But later, when describing land animals, beasts, livestock, insects, it was only used as a description because there is no out of nothing. Next. In Genesis 1:26, then God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Here, asa is used. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over the earth, and on every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. But in the stage when God created a human being, it is very special because generally bara was first and then asa was later. But when human being was created, we can see that asa was first and bara was later, and we can explain that it happened simultaneous. Let us see asa human being was evolved from the monkey. The Genesis 1:27-28. So God created man in his own image. Here is bara. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them, and God blessed them. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of heaven, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Next 10 creations in the Bible. But at the same time, God also adds bara, that is out of nothing, to give to man his own image, his own spirit. So, although man and The ape body have a lot of the same similarity, but spiritually it is completely different. Only man has a superb consciousness, has instincts to create an event, and has a strong moral concept conscious, and has a ritual of worshipping God, which is unique to man. And God specifically gave his own image to man, and only then will he has a spirit that is completely different from animals. Apes and other animals do not have this spirit. The use of asa plus bara altogether already tells that man is involved, but at the same time it is also a special creation God created out of nothing, and that the image of God that gives us the image of God is a spiritual life of God. So I don't object to the fact that man is involved from apes, but at the same time, God has given us a spiritual life in the form of God, in particularly. Okay, next slide. So there are two steps in creating creation. One is bara, out of nothing, and another is asa, design and transformation. So, so the creationism of the Bible, I personally believe that we can call it creation evolutionism. There are two steps. First is from out of nothing, and then at genetic modification and influences environment, living creatures began to evolve from lower to higher creatures. Christianity believes that biological evolution is a fact, but the first cell is created and then evolves into higher organism. It will only appear through God's genetic design, modification, and environmental influence. Where next slide 12, the creation evolution of the Bible. So Christianity believes that the biological evolution is a fact, but the first cell was created, bara, and then evolved into higher organism, which was modified by God's genetic design and environmental influences. Darwin's theory of evolution. Darwin's theory of evolution, which is familiar to everyone, it is explained the evolutionary phenomena of animals with the three mechanisms of genetic mutation, material competition, and survival of the fittest. Next slide. Through genetic mutation, natural selection eliminates those individuals who are less adaptable to the environment. And individuals who are most adaptable to the environment can be preserved and prospered. Those who are most adaptable to the environment in the survival competitions ensure their chances of survival. Darwin's theory of evolution is that through genetic mutation, natural selection, so that those who are less adapted to the environment are eliminated. The most adaptable to the environment of the individual can be preserved and prosper. Therefore, after genetic mutation, those who can best adapt to the environment are very good at ensuring their chances of survival. Therefore, animal evolution occurs naturally without intervention of God at all. What is the difference? The differences between creationism and evolutionism. The biological evolution of creationism arises because of God's wonderfully ingenious genetic design coupled with the influence of the environment. Next slide. Creationism versus evolutionism. Darwin's theory of evolution, on the other hand, believes that there is no need for God's participation as long as through genetic mutation, competition in the world, natural elimination, and survival of the fittest, it can slowly evolve from inferior to higher organism little by little. Next is Darwin's story. Let us briefly introduce Darwin's story. Darwin was born in 1809 in a family of medicine. His father, grandfather were famous doctors, and his father expected him to become a doctor. Darwin liked biology from an early age, often went to the field to collect insect specimens. His father sent him to the University of Edinburgh to study medicine, but he was not very interested and was dropped out of school. His father then sent him to Cambridge University to study theology, because at that time, to be a priest was of high social status. But he often went to the biological department to audit. When he was about to graduate, the British government organized the Beagle Warship's global biological expedition to collect animal and plant specimens and excavate biological fossils around the world for research. Darwin accidentally participated in this expedition because one of the biology students who had originally signed up to participate decided not to participate. Someone suggested to find Darwin to replace Darwin, gladly agreed. And later he went to explored it twice at his own expense, which changed Darwin's life. Originally to be a pastor, changed into an expert in biological evolution. The publication of the original species shocked the whole world. Next slide. Let's continue our story of Darwin. This is a picture of the ship. Darwin took this ship for his voyage and exploration. Next slide. This is a translation of the Beagle. Next slide. This is Darwin's concept of evolutionary trees, and the higher animals and plants are slowly evolved from the inferior, like a branch of a tree. And the higher the above is the higher the animal and the plant. Okay, next. This is an evolutionary map of reptiles, evolving from primitive reptiles into snakes, lizards, rays, turtles, some of which have been extinguished, such as dinosaurs, petrelid, snake dragons, etc. Some evolved into birds, mammals, etc. Okay, next, 22. Monkey can be seen here, and apes and human are genetically very similar, more than 95% genetically similar. Especially gorilla, which is which indirectly connects the possibility that people are monkeys and apes have evolved. Next slide. Stratigraphic dating. This is an evolution geologic time scale. Next, 24. Next, 25. Darwin's theory of evolution, although logically plausible, is not entirely confirmed. And Darwin had two concerns when he was alive. One was that it was difficult to explain the evolution of the eye. Because the eye was too precise and ingenious, and almost perfect design was unlikely to evolve naturally, which we mentioned last time. The second is that since it takes a long time to evolve from lower to higher animals, as reptiles evolved into mammals in a couple billion years, there should be a lot of transitional fossils. But strangely enough, before Darwin's death, only a very small number of transitional fossils were found. So Darwin said that he hoped that after his death, more transitional fossils would be discovered, then his theory of evolution could be confirmed. Next slide, 26. Chinese Qianjian animal fossils. The picture for the museum. First, I want to introduce Professor Hou Xinguang of the Department of Nanjing University. Professor Hou heard that animal fossils were found in Yunnan, Qianjiang, so he went to Qianjiang to study the fossils in the Tianshan mountain. He lived here for a month, went out every day to look for animal fossils. But a month passed. No fossil was found. Today was the last day. It was raining heavily. So he would give up and go back. But he thought to himself, since I came, it's not a heavy rain. Why not look for another time? But he didn't find anything. But suddenly, when he wanted to give up, he was stumbled by a stone. It was a complete sea animal fossil. He was overjoyed. He decided to stay and dig more fossils. And God rewarded his hard work. He excavated a lot of sea creature fossils. That half a billion years ago, all 8 phylum of animal fossils were found in the Cambrian level. The finding proves that Not as Darwin said, it would take hundreds of millions of years in order to slowly evolve from inferior animals to higher animals. The fossils of the 8 phyla animals, from the lowest to the highest, all appeared simultaneously during the Cambrian period, prove that Darwin's theory was wrong. This is a fossil site of the Qianjian fauna. This is a place where Professor Hou Xianguang excavated fossils in the Maotian Mountains. Okay, next slide, 28. So here are Cambrian sea creatures exploded. Here are a few photos. This one is the original primitive biota of the ocean. Next slide, 29. This is a pristine marine life. You can see the colorful and shows the diversity of living things. Next slide, clover. Many generations of Cambrian trilobites are the ancestors of arthropods, which with 3 parts, the cephalon, thorax, and the tail. This is a Cambrian marine species explosion. This is a fossil for a tribunal well preserved, and the fossil traces are clearly visible. Next slide. This is a primitive shrimp named Lagania. Next slide, 33. This is a primitive fish. Because it was found in Kunming, Qianjian, Maotian Mountain, so it was named Kunming fish. Next slide. A primitive life form with metabolism and self-reproduction ability was formed 3.5 billion years ago. Although the embryonic form of life on Earth can be traced back to 4 billion years ago, the first 3.5 billion years were spent on low-level fish such as single cells, until the magic explosion of Cambrian creatures 530 million years ago. The early prototypes of the phyla level miraculously appeared on the Earth. The fossils have been preserved to this date and were discovered in Maotian Mountain, Qianjiang, Yunnan, China. Next, 35. This is the English translation of Cambrian creature explanation. Well, next 36. Darwin's theory of evolution is wrong. Two of Darwin's concerns have already been expressed above. First, it is difficult to explain the evolution of the eye, which has already been explained earlier. Second, only a very small number of transitional fossils, and to this date, no new transitional patterns have been discovered, confirming that Darwin's theory of evolution is wrong. The Cambrian biological explosion was the biggest blow to Darwin's theory of evolution. It was confirmed that Darwin's theory was wrong because the Cambrian suddenly appeared all together with the sea creatures of the 8 phylum. 500 million years ago. And there was no slow evolution at all. The inferior first and the higher ones later, and all the sea creatures of the 8 phyla appeared together, all together 500 million years ago, which completely negated Darwin's theory of evolution. Next slide. If Darwin's theory of evolution, because of explosion of only a few intermediate transitional species and a Cambrian species, has proved that Darwin's theory of evolution is wrong, and only with the indirect proof of God can God's creation and intelligent design make sense. Next. 39. Summary of Creationism and Evolutionism. Recent research on heat shock or heat shock protein has led to a new theory of evolution. Although the cells have more and more mutant animal essence, but a large part of them accumulated, rarely released, results in mutations in cell. But this study found that if the environment changes drastically, there's a survival crisis. This heat shock protein will be produced in large quantities, and the cells will release a large amount of accumulated mutated amino acid, so new variants can be produced quickly. But this heat shock protein has not yet been fully confirmed, and it is still under study. And if this theory is proven to be correct, it will only be reasonable to explain it with intelligent design. Next 40 has a summary of God and evolution. The creation of all things in the universe and the evolution of living things are all manifestations of God's creation, intelligent design, and transformation, and the nature of truth, goodness, and beauty, which can be confirmed by indirect proof as long as they are created. Therefore, we can conclude that the emergence of all things in the universe and the evolution of living things are not naturally occurring, but are due to God's creation, intelligent design, and transformation, and God's creation of all things is the most reasonable explanation. We are next 41. We live in this world today because God created us. God created us just as our parents gave birth to us and loved us. And because of love, Jesus came into the world to save us, to give us new life. And in the future, He will take us back to the heaven and live with Him forever. This is the greatest gift, the greatest grace, and the most fulfilling blessing of life that God has to give to human being. Next. 42. We need to remember that Jesus is love. He will not force you. Just wait until you are willing. He will surely take you back to heaven, live with Him forever, and enjoy the warmth and great love in the Lord. Well, that's it for today. Thank you, and see you next Saturday.